Hello and welcome to this video. My name is Dan and I'll be walking you through how to use Camtasia and how to go from a complete beginner to basically a professional all in this single video. Today, you're going to learn how to record and capture your screen, how to import and add media, how to edit your videos using annotations, animations, transitions, audio effects, and much more, as well as how to produce your video and bonus tips for editing and creating better videos. So just as a few notes, I'm currently using Studio 9 and I'm using a Windows computer. So some of the commands that I might say will be different for someone who's using a Mac. So for example, I might say the control key versus the command key. If you're recording on your computer, I highly suggest using a higher quality microphone than the one that's built into your computer. So I'm currently using the Blue Yeti microphone. It's a very popular one and I love it so far. So I highly recommend checking it out. And if you're recording video on your smartphone or on your camera, consider using an external microphone like a lavalier mic. They're fairly inexpensive, but they will definitely make a huge difference when you're recording outside or when you're at a distance away from your phone or your camera. So if you're interested in checking out the Blue Yeti or the lavalier microphone that I currently use, you can check it out in the description below along with other resources that may help you out. So when you first launch Camtasia, you'll be presented with this initial startup window. So the first option is to open a new project, and that's going to open up the main Camtasia dashboard. Next is to hit new recording, and that's going to open up the recorder so you can start capturing your screen. And the third option is to open up an existing project. You also have the ability to select a recent project right here. And if you don't want to see this window upon startup, you can simply uncheck the button here. So let's go ahead and start a new project. So here's the Camtasia interface. On the left-hand side, we have our effects and our features that we're going to be adding into our videos. Here is what's known as the canvas, and that's going to allow us to visually see what we're doing in real time to our video as we're making edits to it. And then on the right-hand side is going to be properties. So once we start adding in effects and features, we'll get into more of how these properties are going to be used. And then on the bottom is our timeline. So let's go ahead and open up the recorder to learn how we can start recording and capturing our screen. So when you open up the recorder, you're going to see the new window pop up here on the bottom right-hand corner. So as a default, Camtasia is going to record the entire screen. Now, if you want to set a custom area that you want to record, you can do so by clicking this button here and selecting, or you can click on the custom button and you can also drag the handles here to customize your recording area. The next thing is being able to record your camera. So if you want to record your camera, you can do so with your computer's internal camera, or if you have an external one, you can also select it here as well. And then for audio, have a few options. So you can use your computer's built-in audio or microphone. You can choose not to record any audio. You can record your system's audio. And if you have an external microphone like the Blue Yeti, you can select that here. What I definitely recommend is always checking that you have the right settings or the right microphone selected before recording, because sometimes it will default to using the default microphone that's built into your computer, even though you've plugged in an external microphone. So always double check that. So you can also go in here and check out some of the other options that you have. But once you're ready to start recording, you can simply hit the record button and you'll be given a countdown timer so you can start preparing for your screen capture. Now, to see whether or not you're recording, if you look on the upper right-hand side, you'll see a blinking green line, and that's just to indicate that your screen is currently being recorded. Now, as you're recording, there's a few options when it comes to deleting or pausing the recording. So if you open up the recorder, you see you can delete it. So if you're unhappy with your recording, you can start over by hitting this button. If you just want to pause for whatever reason, simply hit the pause button and then you can resume. And if you're done with your recording, you have two options. You can hit the stop button on this recorder window, or you can hit the F10 button. So I'm just going to hit the stop button here. And you'll see that a new media has been added into our bin, and it's automatically been added into our timeline. So right now, I'm just going to record another sample clip of video, and then we're going to go through and start adding in effects and working on the editing process. So I've just recorded a sample clip so that we have a template to work off of when we're adding in our effects and features here. So one of the first things that I like to do is I like to add in a noise removal effect. So I click on audio effects, go to noise removal, and I can drag it down to the timeline here. Now, what this does is basically it helps take out some of the background noise. So for me personally, I have a laptop fan that's running, so you can definitely hear that in my audio. So throughout the editing process, I really don't want to hear that as I'm going through and constantly playing the clip over and over and hearing that noise. So I try to take that out right away. So for me, I generally set the sensitivity up to about an 8 to 10, and this is going to be determined by your personal noise levels. So play around with it, see how it affects your audio, and then you can go on and proceed with the rest of your effects. So once I have that, the next thing I like to typically do is I like to go through the audio clip and look for any mistakes that I've made. So as a tip, when you're recording yourself on screen or even on a camera, you're undoubtedly going to make some mistakes along the way. So when I make a mistake, I like to either snap my fingers or clap my hands, and that's going to basically cause a spike in the timeline. And what that does is that helps me identify where I need to go and make changes. So I'll snap my fingers or clap my hands. I'll wait maybe 2 to 3 seconds, and then I'll go back and rehearse or restate the line that I messed up, right? So this is a great way so you can visually see where you need to make changes throughout your track. So as soon as you record a new clip, it's going to be put into your media bin, and when you initially record something, it's going to be put right into your timeline. Now, another thing I like to do initially is to separate my audio and visual, or audio and video, and you can do that by right-clicking on the track here and hit separate audio and video. Now, let's go through and just kind of familiarize yourself with the timeline. So here is what's known as the playhead. So as you drag this through here, that's going to take you throughout the video. And once we start adding in more effects, you'll see how this is really beneficial, but it allows you to jump through your video very, very quickly. And then here is where we can zoom in and out of our timeline. So depending on how long your clip is or how long your project is, this is really going to help you kind of hone in on certain areas that you want to modify. Here we have the undo button. So pretty straightforward. If you made a mistake in your editing process, you can simply hit undo, and then here's the redo. We have the cut feature, copy, and paste. And then here we have a split feature. So a split feature is basically when we want to split, let's say, a block here. So you highlight the section that you want to split, you simply hit the S key, and you'll notice that now we have two separate pieces of content to move around. Now, instead of using the undo button here, I like to just hit Control Z for Windows to undo what I've just done. So I hit Control Z, and now we're back to its original state. Another thing I want to mention is instead of hitting the play button, using the space bar. So as you go throughout your editing process and you want to play and pause, using the space bar is definitely going to save you a lot of time from having to go and use the actual play button here. So as you go through, you want to basically clean up all the mistakes from your project. So as I mentioned before, if you go here and you see a spike, that basically means that this area needs some attention. So I know that from here I have a mistake. So what I tend to do is I will go through and I will start the playhead. So I'll hit the space bar and play it out. Hey, and welcome to this video on how to increase your So right there you heard the snap and you heard the section that I messed up on. So what you can do is on the playhead, you can drag these handles, the green and red handles, to select a certain clip or portion that you want to modify. Now, let's say I want to delete out this entire initial section. I can simply highlight it and I can hit the delete button. Now when you hit the delete button, the section to the right is going to stay exactly where it is. Now if you want the entire section to shift to the left, you can do a different type of delete known as a ripple delete. So I'm going to Control Z and undo that. So instead of just hitting delete, I'm going to hold down the control button and I'm going to hit delete. And you can see now everything to the right of the red handle has shifted to the left. That makes more sense when you're deleting out sections not in the front of a clip, but maybe in between. So let's see what happens when we try that. So if you want to return the playhead to its original state, you can just simply double click on it. So let's go ahead and just delete out a section. So if I just hit the delete button, you'll notice that there was a gap. But if I undo that and I hit or hold down Control and then hit delete, you'll now see the entire section on the right side shift to the left. And what you'll also see now is what's known as a stitch. So if you were to highlight these individual tracks, you'll notice that it's one continuous track. If you wanted to kind of separate it, you can go ahead and hit the unstitch button, and now you'll see that there are two separate tracks here. Now this is going to be used depending on how you're going to edit where you've deleted. So if you want to add in a transition, which we're going to talk about in a second, then you definitely want to unstitch the two. But if you want to keep it as one continuous loop, you can keep it stitched together. So let's undo a couple of those last edits here, and let's make sure we have the two separate audio and video. So let's say you wanted to add in a clip somewhere in the middle of your video. So you would do the simple delete feature, and if you had another clip, you can simply click and then drag it to your timeline. So because this new clip I want to add is longer than the gap I have here, what you can do is you can shift your clips. So I can highlight the clips I want to move, and I can simply drag them by holding the shift key and then dragging the clips. Now to highlight multiple clips, what I do is I hold down the control key and then select the clips I want. Or you can hold the shift key. And to shift everything to the right or to the left, you can simply hold down the shift key and move your tracks. So let's say I wanted to drop this track in. Now I can highlight these two, hold down the shift key, and then move that to the left. All right. So let's just undo a couple of those moves and go back to its original state. Again, double click the playhead. So let's walk through now and actually add in some features and effects to our video. So if you go into the annotations area here, you're going to see a ton of different tabs for all the different effects that you can add with annotations. To add in an annotation, you can simply drag and then drop it right onto the canvas exactly where you want it, or you can drag it down to the timeline, and then on the canvas it's going to be put in its default location. Now, we talked earlier about the properties area, so you can see once we add in effect, here's where we can have the ability to change its features. Now, you can also change it directly on the screen, which makes it a lot easier. So if you wanted to change the text, you can simply double click and type right on the screen. You can drag the handles to grow or reduce the size of your annotation. Here on the property side, you can also see tabs as well, right? So we have tabs on the features and effects area as well as in the properties area to really help organize all the different things you can do. So if you wanted to change the color of the text, we can do so here. We can change the color of the background block here as well. And this is the properties for our overall visual area. So we have the ability to change the scale, the opacity or transparency, and then as well as the rotation of the visual area. So we'll get more into this in a little bit. And another thing to point out here is being able to control your view of the canvas. So if you want to zoom in or zoom out, depending on what areas you need to focus on, here's where you would do so. You can click on the hand and you can pan and drag the visible area around. But let's just go back to fit and work from there. So next we have arrows that we can add. And one thing to mention is down on your timeline, you want to think of your tracks as layers. So every track above is going to be put on as a layer on what's underneath it. So if you were to drag the screen, let's say, above, you wouldn't be able to see the arrow and the text block because it's sitting underneath. So that's important when it comes to adding in effects and making sure that everything shows up how you want it to. All right, so again, think of your tracks as layers. And once you start adding more tracks in, if you need to change your view of the interface, you can drag this up so you can see all your tracks more easily, but this does reduce the size of your canvas. So you're going to have to play around with that and see what you're comfortable with throughout your editing process. But you can also scroll on the right hand side here and see all of your tracks that way. Another thing you can do is to be able to change the height of the tracks here on the left hand side. So again, a lot of this is experimentation and just moving or dragging and playing with the features to see what does what. Alright, so now going back to our effects, here are simple shapes you can add. Blurs are great if you want to blur out a certain section of your screen that you don't want your audience to see. So again, you can simply drag and drop. And when you drag and drop, it's going to be put into your timeline wherever your playhead is, at that point in time. So if you wanted it to be up here, you would simply drag and drop, or all of your effects are easily movable on your timeline. So you can move them up and down, or you can move them to different tracks as well. All right. So when you have a blur, let's say, if your playhead is in a section that you don't see the blur, you're not going to have the ability to actually make changes to it. But as soon as you hover over it, you can see that it shows up on your screen and it'll show up in your properties area. So you can change the effects here and the intensity of your blur. So you can also change the size of the blur area and where it is located. So make sure that you're using the edit mode. So you can see you have the ability to resize it, to position it, as well as rotate it. All right. Next we have a spotlight. So let's go ahead and maybe let's say we want to blur that out. So let's put in a spotlight here. So basically when you have a spotlight, that dims out the area outside of your spotlight section. So this is a great way to highlight a certain section of your screen. Next we have highlight. So let's add this in. Again, another way to draw your audience's eyes and attention to a certain area. And then you can add in sketch motions. So let's say you want to emphasize a certain section as well, or an area of the screen to focus on. You can add in a sketch motion. So if we drag the playhead throughout our timeline, we'll be able to see the effects without actually having to play the clip. But if you want to play the clip, I'm going to hit the space bar. So you can see how as you're playing the clip, your eyes are immediately drawn to different sections of the screen, and that's really going to help you kind of direct your audience's attention rather than just having a static screen without any effects or without any motion. So the effects are pretty straightforward, and again, there was a lot to choose from, which is great, and a lot of options to help you really hone in and emphasize on certain areas of your screen that you want your audience to pay attention to. So let's move into the behaviors section. Now I'm going to go into transitions later on, but I want to skip that for just a few minutes here, and let's go into behaviors. So now that we have all these effects in our timeline, what's going to happen is, as a default, the effects are just going to appear and disappear instantaneously. And once they're on your screen, they're going to be static. Now, if you want to add some more dynamic options to it, then what you can use are what's known as behaviors. And behaviors can be applied to your annotations, which include your arrows, your blurs, spotlights, and even your text. So to add a behavior, you can simply click and you can start moving it. And you'll notice that once I started moving the behavior, all the boxes highlighted in that bluish turquoise color, and that basically means or tells me which effects that this behavior can be applied to. So you can click and drag it and drop it over your timeline, or you can also drag it right on to the canvas as well. So what I recommend doing is go ahead and just trying out different behaviors on different annotations just to see how they look throughout your video. So let's go ahead and hit play, and let's move this arrow and kind of separate everything out. So let's go through and see how these behaviors affect the actual annotations in real time. Now, before I do that, right now I'm hovering over my snap. So you can see the spike in the audio track right here. So what I want to do is shift all of my annotations to the right. So if I were just to highlight this arrow and I were to drag it, you would see that it would only move that arrow. But if I wanted to shift everything, I would use what's known as the ripple move, which I talked about earlier. And again, what you do is you hold down the shift key and then you drag, and you can see everything within that track moves with it. All right. So that's definitely a very useful feature. So now I can move my playhead and start from here, and let's see how these behaviors affect the actual annotations. All right, so right there you have a few examples of how those behaviors add some more dynamic options to your editing process. So one that I typically like to use is fade. It's great for simple things like arrows and your text blocks. But if you want to really make your videos or parts of your videos more dynamic, you can try using some of these behaviors. So I'm going to go ahead and delete out all of these um, annotations, and you can see that as I click and I drag, I can highlight multiple effects and features here. I'm just going to hit the delete button because now what we're going to do is we're going to shift and we're going to look into animations. So if you go to the animations tab, what animations really allow you to do is to be able to pan to different sections of your screen and zoom in and out to really, again, direct your audience's focus and really emphasize certain parts of your screen. So let's say I wanted to kind of highlight this section as I'm talking about it. So what I would do here is I would find the clip where I start talking about it, so I know exactly where I want to start panning and zooming in. So let's play this and find that clip. As a free bonus, you'll get a free guide that's going to teach you how to master your mindset on money. So right there, I found out where I first started talking about the Money Mindset Mastery Guide. So what I can do is I can now go into the animations area and I can choose the scale up animation and drag it to my timeline. Now, basically an animation is like a bridge. So on the left-hand side is going to be one state of your screen, and then on the right-hand side is going to be a different state. So the animation really acts as a bridge and a transition to get from one view to another view. And then you can click the handles here and drag to change the duration. So let's go ahead and define our new view. So we can see on the left-hand side here, we're basically in our original state. So we're at 100% scale, opacity, rotation, and position. And if we double click on the actual animation, here's where we can start making changes. So you can see already that it's zoomed in to 125%. So I also want to be more focused on this specific section. So I can go ahead and move the actual screen. And if I want to zoom in even more, I can do so and then continue to change the position, right? So you notice that these numbers change as well. So as I drag the playhead, I'll be able to see exactly what's going to happen here. And because I cut out this text area, let's say I want to reposition, I can simply reposition it by dragging it. And let's go ahead and play it and see how it works. The bonuses you'll receive is the Money Mindset Mastery Guide. All right, so you notice that I'm a little bit off in terms of my timing. So I can simply drag it and I can extend it as well. And another thing you can do is you can right click on the actual arrow here and you can change the way that the transition or the animation occurs. The most common ones are going to be your exponential one and even linear, but you can also see what spring and bounce looks like, and that's going to be more for certain features like maybe a graphic or a text box. Is the Money Mindset Mastery Guide. So let's say now that I want to transition over to the lifestyle designer's blueprint. What I would do is I can add in, let's say, a custom animation, and I can simply shift it over. So let's see how that looks. So let's drag this out so that it works well with the audio. And let's add another one because we have another one on the right side that we want to focus on. So here's our last one. And let's see how this plays out. The Money Mindset Mastery Guide, the Lifestyle Designer's Blueprint, and the Perfect Business Formula and Launch Guide. All right, so that looks pretty good. So now I want to direct, let's say, a person's attention up to the URL box. So I could add in another custom animation here, and then I would simply go up to this area, and let's see how that looks. Let's drag this out. All right, so that looks pretty good. So if I wanted to highlight, let's say, the URL, I can simply click on the sketch motion, drag it onto the canvas, resize it, and then, of course, add in a behavior so that it doesn't just instantaneously show up and disappear. So let's see what that looks like. All right. So you can see how you can work with animations as well as adding in those annotations to all coincide and really help you make your video much more dynamic. So let's say we're done with our pans and our animations and we want to return back to the original state. So if we go back to animations, whoops, I just zoomed in here by accident. Let's go to fit. So let's go ahead and we can use custom, put it on the timeline, and then what we can do is we can simply click these arrows here to go back to its original default states. So let's see what this all looks like. All right, so now we're back in the original state. Now this is great for tutorial videos, and it's really great when you're looking to show people how to maybe insert something into a specific text box, but you can't see it from a far distance. So you want to be able to zoom in and be able to show people with much more clarity exactly what you want them to do. So the next set of effects you can use are cursor effects. So if you want to help your audience with seeing their or seeing your cursor throughout the video, you can certainly click and drag this onto your timeline. Or if you want to magnify a certain area around your cursor, you can use this magnify section. So that's really going to be used for, let's say, a specific section and not necessarily the entire video. Let's see what that looks like if we were to add it to, let's say, this specific clip here. So to do so, I'm going to have to separate this section from the rest. So what I can do is hit the S button after I've selected the track that I want to split. So I'm going to hit S where I want to start the clip, and then hit S where I want to end the clip again after highlighting the track that I want to split. So I'll hit the S button, and you can see that this clip is completely independent from what's before it. So if I drag the cursor magnify, you'll now be able to see how a section around the cursor is magnified. So as you move your cursor around throughout the video, it's going to magnify the area around it. And if you want to do highlight instead, you can choose that. So if you want to see what effects are currently added to certain clips, you can highlight the clip on the track, you can right click, see, or click on Edit Effects, and you'll be able to see all the effects are added. So right now we have cursor magnify. So I'm going to highlight that. And if I highlight it, you'll be able to see that I have the ability to change its properties up here in the properties area. But let's say I wanted to delete it. So I'm going to right click, I'm going to hit delete, and instead maybe I want to do cursor spotlight. So once again, we can see that it's only applied to the clip that we selected it on, and you can see that we have the ability to change the properties here on the properties side. So if I wanted to delete it, I can right click, hit Edit Effects, I'm going to choose Cursor Spotlight, and I'm going to hit Delete. And then you also have a few more effects to help you or help the audience see when you are clicking your mouse, either with the left click or the right click. And then let's go back to transitions, which I talked about earlier. Now, transitions are really going to be more for going from one scene to another. So where you can add transitions is in between actual clips here. So to add a transition, simply click and drag it to the actual area that you want your transition to be applied. And if you were to click and drag, you can see that it changes basically the duration of that transition. So let's go ahead and try that out and see what it looks like. Now, I don't have a different scene here, but let's say I wanted to add a new scene to the end. This is a little bit out of order, but I wanted to make sure that you can clearly see how transitions are done. So let's just pick a stock scene to add in. So we'll go to media, and in the media bin, this is where you have your own personal media. So you can add in media from outside. So if you have other, let's say, audio files, even images, PowerPoint slides, other video recordings, here's where you can do so. Simply hit import media and pick from your files. But Camtasia also has some free media in their library that you can use. So let's go ahead into the library section and see what they have available. So we have a lot to choose from, including icons. And to see a preview of anything in the library, simply right click on anything you want and hit the preview button. And that way you can see what it looks like before actually having to put it in your timeline. So lots of icons here to choose from, as you can see. But let's choose a motion graphic. So let's see what this looks like. We'll hit preview. Okay, great. So that'll work for our other scene. So we can simply click and drag it, add it to our timeline. And let's go ahead and add a transition now. So we'll go with the fade with black like we did before and see how that looks. All right. If you wanted to make it a quicker transition, you can simply drag the handles here. And if you don't like it, you can highlight it, hit the delete button, or right click and hit delete. Oops, I deleted the wrong thing. So make sure you're highlighting the right thing before you hit delete. So I'm going to delete, and we can try a different one. Right. So pretty simple and straightforward. Instead of hitting play, you can also drag the playhead and see the transition as well from that view. So one thing I wanted to point out here is when I added in this clip, the clip was added in as a group of basically individual features and effects. So if I want to see exactly what it's made up of, I can hit this plus arrow and I can see what's inside this group. So let's drag through and see. what's inside of it. So right here that I see that we have text box within this group. So if I wanted to change what the text is, I can simply click on it, go to the screen, and change it out to whatever I want to be. So I will say hi there again here, and then maybe I want to change this and say welcome. And you can see as I left clicked out of it, it collapsed the group. And you can also make your own groups as well. So let's say I have right here this sketch motion. And let's say I wanted to add another feature or an effect. So let's add in this arrow right above it. So to group something, you can simply select multiple clips here by holding down the control feature, selecting the clips that you want to create into a group, right click, and simply hit group. To change the name, you can right click, rename it here. So I'll just call this test group. And then to open it up, hit the plus button. And then that will allow you to go in and modify the properties here. And if you want to collapse it, you can hit that minus button. And to delete the group, you can simply, or ungroup it, right click and hit ungroup. Right, so that's going to be a good feature to be able to kind of clean up some of your effects if you want to. So let's go ahead and delete out this section here. And let's look into the audio effects. So initially we looked into noise removal. You can also add in what's known as volume leveling. So that prevents basically your audio file from having any sort of spikes in it, and really reduces or compresses the audio so that it's more consistent throughout the entire clip. So to do that, you can simply click and drag it onto your timeline, and here on the right hand side is where you can change the properties. So you can see we have our noise removal effect in place, and now we have a volume leveling effect put in. And we also have your fade in and fade outs. So typically I like to end my videos by fading out the audio. So I'll click and drag that to the timeline there, and then also to the beginning up here. And what you'll notice is these green dots, and these are known as audio points. So when you highlight your audio track, you can see that you have the ability to change the volume simply by clicking and dragging this green bar here. And these audio points, you can actually manually put them in yourself. So if you hover over the green line and you double left mouse click, you can see that I dropped in an audio point there. And maybe I want to add another one here. And what you can do is basically change the volume or the level of specific areas throughout your clips. So maybe I want this section to be a little bit quieter. So you can see I add in 4 audio points there. And let's try and delete this one. And you can see now I have it set to where it drops the volume down, and it's going to gradually increase to this audio point, which you can simply slide and move however you see fit. All right, so very dynamic in terms of what you can do there. If you don't want those points, simply right click and hit delete. In this part of the video, I just wanted to cover a few more effects and features or shortcuts that I didn't cover in the initial recording. So the first thing I want to talk about is copy and pasting effects. So let's say you know that you want to copy an arrow. Well, you can simply hit the Control-C button, and then if you hit the Control-V button, it's going to be placed wherever your playhead is at that current time. So if I hit Control-V, I can see the arrow was pasted there. Now, if your initial or original arrow had a behavior added to it, let's say like a fade, and you copied it, the behavior is also going to be copied as well. That way, if you're adding in many arrows, you don't have to constantly add in the behavior each and every time. It's going to be copied and pasted for you. So that's a great shortcut. Next is these keystrokes. So if you go into your annotations, and like I did throughout this video, I said things like Control-C or Control-V or even the spacebar. So here you can change the style, but if I know I want to do Control-Z, what I would do is put my cursor inside this block, and I would actually on my keyboard hold down Control, and hit Z. And then it populates it right into the graphic. So that's pretty cool right there, especially when you're doing tutorial videos like I'm doing here right now. The next thing I wanted to talk about was hiding your tracks. So if you click on this here, this icon, you'll be able to hide the track and it will not show up in your actual video. So let's say you have an audio and you want to hide it, or you just have a track that you're testing things out on. You can hide it here and then click it again to unhide it. And if you have a track that you want to lock to prevent yourself from making any sort of editing or making mistakes while editing, you can lock a track by clicking that button here, and you'll see it's changed and grayed out essentially. Another tip is if you want to silence a portion of your audio file, what you can do is click on the audio part or the audio track. You can highlight a certain section, let's say with your playhead, and you can hit the Shift S combination. So you would hold down Shift, press S, and you'll see that the volume for that section is basically down to 0. So that might be in a section where you're doing something on your screen, but you have some background noise and you just want to cut out the sounds. Using this silence feature is a great way to do that. And another thing you can do is once you've made that selection, you can right click and you can hit silence audio from there. And one more feature I wanted to show was the lower third. So if you go into media and into the library, if you go into the bonus and lower third area, let's add this in here. So we can see it's been added up here. And basically this is a way to add in more information into your videos. So let's say at the beginning of your videos, you might want to add in your name. So to edit, you can double click on the actual icon or graphic inside the canvas, or down below, you can hit the plus arrow and that will open up all the individual components, to which then you can select and change. So I can add my name in here, and I'm going to say, this is a test just to show you. And once again, you have a lot of control in terms of the color and the shape, which you can find all in the properties section. So next we can go into the visual effects. Now here's some more effects that you can add in to your videos. So if you had, let's say, a green screen and you wanted to do a different background, you can use this feature here. You can remove the color of the green screen, and then you would just overlay an image, let's say as a individual track, and that's going to basically give you like a talking head with a different background. So pretty cool. And another cool feature is the device frame. So if you go to your timeline and you apply a device frame, now you may not want to do this for your entire video, but maybe a section of it, you can see that your screen is actually put inside of a specific device here. And you can choose different devices here in the drop-down menu on the side. So you can select a MacBook Pro. So that's a pretty cool feature. And if you want to delete it, you could delete it by right-clicking here going to Effects and deleting it from here, or you can X out of it in the Properties area. So those are a few extra bonus features or tips I wanted to share with you. So now let's talk about what to do when you're first starting out with Camtasia. So what I recommend doing is if you're just starting out with Camtasia and you're trying to get a hold of all the features and effects, it may be overwhelming to start, but once you play around with it a little bit, you'll definitely get the hang of it in a very short amount of time. So you can simply go in, record maybe a 2-3 minute clip of a screen capture, right? Add in some audio, make sure you have a very kind of dynamic piece to work with. So move your mouse around, scroll through your screen, and then once you have your clip recorded, put it in your timeline, and then just start going into your annotations and start dragging in different features. And that's just a great way to see what features are available and get an idea of how the playhead works, how the timeline works, how to really add in the behaviors. So I might try to throw in a bunch of different things here, and then really just kind of get all the effects and have an understanding of what capabilities you have at your fingertips, so that when you start watching other people's videos and you see how they move around the screen, you'll be able to easily replicate what they're doing because you've played around and you understand all the features and effects. Now, one of the hardest things I personally had trouble with is understanding the animations features and the zooming and panning. So, kind of like what I did here, I definitely recommend you just going into your animations, dropping in different ones. Custom is a great one to get started with, because you can do scaling up and you can do scaling down and panning with it. So if there is only one animation that you can use, start out with custom, but just play around with each one and you can just drag the playhead and see what effects are taking place. Remember, an animation is basically a transition or a bridge from one kind of state to another state. So you're going to go from something on the left hand side, and then if you double click, you're going to be able to change the state of the screen by simply altering its scale, its opacity, its position, and even its rotation, right? So let's say I wanted to do something funky, you can do that, and you can click and drag and see what happens here, right? So it's pretty cool. Again, for me, understanding the concept of animations was the most challenging, but everything else is pretty straightforward. So again, take a few minutes, just record yourself talking on your screen and moving around and making it as dynamic as you can. I didn't really do that in this clip here, but when you go and make your test video to start out, go through different windows, drag and scroll your screen up and down. Let me fit this. And then just start applying different features, and before you know it, you'll have a great understanding of how all of these features and effects is really going to be able to enhance your video editing process. So let's get into some bonus tips of how to improve your video creation and your editing process. The first tip is using jump cuts. A jump cut is basically an abrupt transition. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have to completely transition from one scene to another scene. You can have a transition and perhaps change maybe even the zoom that you're using, or maybe even your position within the frame. Benefits of jump cuts are breaking up the monotony of one continuous shot. That way you don't have to focus on memorizing long scripts, and it's a great editing tool that can fix mistakes in your videos. So let's say you mess up a line, you can simply use a jump cut and crop that out. Hey there. So let's take a look at what a jump cut looks like. So you can move to a different position on one side, or move to the position on the other side. Or you can jump and move in or further away from your original shot. Now, the key thing here is not to overdo your jump cutting. as this can be distracting and quite annoying to your audience, so make sure you use them strategically and sparingly throughout your video. The next tip is using B-rolls in your videos. A B-roll is secondary footage that is shot outside of the primary or A-roll footage. It is used to support the primary footage and is often spliced into the final video to create dramatic effect, emphasize or illustrate a point, or even just to change up the pattern of a video. B-rolls don't have to just be film footage, they can also even be still images. They can include things like atmospheric shots, undirected footage of people, establishing shots, reenactments, stock footage, images, and so on. And a B-roll can cover up gaps, break up the monotony, set tones, establish characters and settings, and really help you explain a point you're trying to make or help you define something as well. So B-rolls are very useful and a great way to change up your video so that you're not showing one continuous shot. So let's check out an example of a simple B-roll. Imagine having a laptop spin in front of you, open up, say TechSmith Camtasia, and then close right in front of your eyes. Could you imagine going on a vacation where you stayed in a hut right over top of crystal blue waters with the mountainous green background? Okay, so you just saw a couple examples of really simple and easy B-rolls just to help you get an idea of what it is. Now, there's many different types of B-rolls, so I just quickly put something together with what I had inside the library and also a stock image. Now, B-rolls can be very, very simple. The first one I did was I simply grabbed something from the library, which was the spinning computer. I added it to the timeline here. I changed the length, and then what I did was I went to voice narration. So if I hit the spacebar to play and I hit the start voice recording button, you can see that it starts recording, and then I can just overlay my voice with the video. I'm going to cancel that. And then for the still image, what I did was I added in the image first, and then I also added in another voice narration. Now, instead of just having the image be completely still, I added in a custom animation to it. And basically, that allows the animation to move the image rather than be static. And you'll often see this with a lot of videos on YouTube that involve voiceovers, because it keeps the image flowing, right? So everything is always dynamic. So that's a really simple and easy way to make sure that you're keeping your audience engaged. And a lot of videos on YouTube even just have image after image where they're constantly panning and zooming. So you learn about how to use animations previously in the video, and this is a great spot to use them. Now, if you already have, let's say, an area where you already have voice done, and instead of the original A-roll video, you want to add in the B-roll video, you would simply go to your media. You would find the media you want either from the library or from your own media bin, but let's just grab something from the library here. And let's say we want motion graphics. So we can easily just drag something right over top of our first track here, and let's see what happens. Shots, undirected footage of people, establishing shots, reenactments, stock footage, images, and so on. So you can see that after adding in that piece of content, because track 2 is over track 1, the image of track 2 is going to take precedence over the image of track 1 right here. So we talked about earlier how your tracks are like layers, so it's as simple as that in terms of adding B-roll footage. Another thing to mention is I also added in a few transitions here to help go from one scene to the next. So you can see how it flows nice and easily, even though they're completely separate topics. Alright, so that wraps up this section on BRolls. So after you've completed your video and you've gone through and made the necessary changes for your editing, it's time to export your video as an MP4. So there's a couple ways that you can do this. First, you can go to the upper right corner where it says Share and choose from the options below, or you can go to Share from the drop-down menu as well. So the first option you have is to choose to save as a local file. The other options are to share it to web-based services, and that requires you to sign in to an account. So let's go ahead and click Local File. And from this drop-down menu, you have a few options. Again, you also have the web services to choose from, and if you select one of these, it will ask you to log into your account. Now, I typically go with the MP4 only option, up to 720p or up to 1080p. Another way you can do it is the custom production settings. So let's first try the MP4 only option. Hit Next. Here you have the option of selecting your file name. Now, if you plan on uploading videos to, let's say, YouTube, make sure that you have your targeted keyword built into your file name. And then here is where you want to select the folder to save it to. And when you're finished, you can go ahead, hit the Finish button, and Camtasia is going to convert your video project into an MP4 file. Now, the other way you can create an MP4 is to go down to the Custom Production Settings. Hit Next. MP4 is automatically selected, but there are other options here as well. So hit Next. Now, the first recommendation is to uncheck the Produce with Controller setting. Now, this is really there if you're using things like the interactive quizzes within Camtasia. So if you're not using any of those inside of your project, you can uncheck that. Next, go to the Video Settings tab. And here you have the ability to change the quality of the video. So keep in mind that as you increase the quality, that also increases the file size. Then you can hit Next. If there's nothing you want to change here, again, hit Next. And as before, you can give your custom file name and then select the folder to which you want to save the project. Once everything is or looks right to you, go ahead and hit Finish, and Camtasia will begin rendering the project. And once your video is complete, I highly recommend going through, watching the video from beginning to end to make sure that all of your effects and all of your editing is exactly where you want it to be. And if you need to make changes again, just come back to the project file, make your changes, and then reproduce your video. So that wraps up this video on how to use Camtasia and go from a beginner to a professional. Now, I know it was a super long video and I hope you got a lot of value out of it. I tried to crunch as much as I could in that short amount of time and all the necessary tools to help you get started and really become proficient with Camtasia. It's an awesome tool, and if you're looking for more resources to help you out with your online business, make sure to check out the resources below. I have a ton of free training and guides on how to make sure you're getting the most out of your business. So thanks again for watching. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and leave a like if you got value out of this video. Take care and have a great day.